I was sitting in my law office just finishing up a major case that would bring in a substantial bonus when my phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister Sophie. The message hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're such a controlling jerk. I'm done with you and your money. Don't contact me again." I stared at the screen in complete shock, having no idea what had triggered this explosion. When I tried calling her, it went straight to voicemail. That's when I realized she had blocked me on every social media platform we shared. Before I tell you how cutting off my spoiled sister's rent money led to the most satisfying life lesson she ever received, drop a comment about where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been taken for granted by family. What happened when the eviction notice arrived will blow your mind. Let me give you the full picture of how this financial arrangement started and why it had gone on for so long. At 32, I had built a successful career as a corporate lawyer at one of the most prestigious firms in Los Angeles. My annual salary of $180,000 came from years of hard work, starting with a full scholarship to law school and grinding through 80-hour weeks as a junior associate. I lived modestly, driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic and renting a small studio apartment because I believed in financial responsibility and building for the future. My sister Sophie, who is 26, had taken a completely different path in life. She was a fine arts major who dropped out during her third year of college, claiming that traditional education was stifling her creativity. Sophie moved to downtown Los Angeles with dreams of becoming an actress, living the bohemian lifestyle that she believed was essential for artistic growth. The problem was that artistic growth did not pay for West Hollywood rent. 3 years ago, Sophie called me sobbing at 2 a.m. She was facing eviction from her tiny studio apartment and had nowhere else to turn. As her big sister, I could not bear the thought of her sleeping on the streets or having to move back home with our parents who were living on a fixed retirement income in Arizona. I agreed to help her find a place and cover the rent temporarily just until she could get back on her feet. The apartment Sophie chose was a 1-bedroom luxury unit in West Hollywood that cost $2,500 per month. It came with a pool, gym, assigned parking space, and doorman service. When I questioned whether she needed such an expensive place, Sophie explained that she needed an environment that would inspire her creativity and help her network with other industry professionals. Against my better judgment, I agreed to cover the rent, thinking it would be a short-term arrangement. What started as temporary assistance quickly became a permanent financial obligation. In addition to the $2,500 monthly rent, I found myself paying her car insurance at $200 per month, plus groceries and utilities, that added another $400 to my monthly expenses. Sophie also had frequent emergencies that required additional funding: headshots, acting classes, audition outfits, and networking events. My total monthly support for my sister was approaching $3,500. To afford this level of support, I made significant sacrifices in my own life. I continued living in my modest studio apartment, instead of upgrading to something more befitting my income level. I postponed vacation plans, worked overtime whenever possible, and drove my aging Honda Civic while Sophie enjoyed her luxury lifestyle. I told myself that this was what family did for each other, and that Sophie would eventually become successful enough to pay me back. Over the 3 years of financial support, Sophie's attitude gradually shifted from grateful appreciation to entitled expectation. In the beginning, she would send me heartfelt thank you texts and promise that she would never forget my generosity. By the second year, the thank you messages became less frequent, and by the third year, they had stopped entirely. Sophie began treating my financial support as if it were her right rather than my choice. The warning signs were subtle at first, but they became increasingly difficult to ignore. Sophie would complain when I gave her practical gifts for holidays instead of expensive items. She started making comments about my cheap lifestyle choices, suggesting that I should treat myself to nicer things, since I was obviously making good money. Most troubling of all, she began telling her friends that she came from a family with money conveniently omitting the fact that every dollar of her comfortable lifestyle was earned by my hard work. The red flags that I had been trying to ignore became impossible to dismiss when I started paying attention to Sophie's social media activity. While she was constantly telling me that she was broke and struggling to make ends meet, her Instagram account told a completely different story. She was posting pictures of expensive designer handbags, fancy dinner dates, spa treatments, and weekend trips to luxury resorts. When I gently asked her about these purchases, she would become defensive and claim that they were gifts from friends or that she had saved up for months to afford them. The breaking point began when I suggested that Sophie needed to develop a concrete plan for becoming financially independent. I approached the conversation carefully, emphasizing that I was proud of her artistic pursuits, but concerned about her long-term financial security. Sophie's reaction was immediate and hostile. She accused me of not understanding the creative process and claimed that art could not be rushed according to arbitrary timelines set by people who prioritized money over passion. The situation escalated dramatically when Sophie demanded that I upgrade her to a 2-bedroom apartment that cost $3,800 per month. Her reasoning was that she needed space for an art studio, and that the extra room could potentially generate income from a roommate. When I hesitated and suggested that she should contribute something to the rent before we considered increasing my financial commitment, Sophie exploded. "I am pursuing my dreams," she screamed over the phone. "That is contribution enough. You make good money and you do not even spend it on anything worthwhile. The least you can do is support your sister's artistic journey instead of being selfish about material things." The final confrontation happened at my 32nd birthday party, which I had organized as a small gathering at a nice restaurant with colleagues and friends. Sophie arrived wearing a $300 designer dress that I knew she could not afford. When I quietly mentioned that the dress looked expensive, she created a public scene that humiliated me in front of my professional contacts. "My sister thinks I am a charity case," she announced loudly to the entire table. "She acts like every dollar she spends on me is some huge sacrifice when she is obviously making plenty of money. I cannot help it if I have better taste than someone who drives a car older than some of my friends." Through mutual acquaintances, I discovered that Sophie had not been to a single audition in over 4 months. Instead of pursuing her acting career, she was spending her days shopping, hanging out with unemployed artist friends, and taking occasional acting classes that she treated more like social activities than professional development. The woman I had been supporting for 3 years was not even seriously pursuing the dreams that supposedly justified my financial sacrifice. I decided to have one final serious conversation about expectations and boundaries. I presented Sophie with a 6-month timeline, during which she would gradually take over 50% of her living expenses. I explained that this was not about punishment, but about helping her develop the life skills she would need for long-term success. Sophie's response revealed just how far our relationship had deteriorated. "You are trying to control my artistic journey," she accused me. "Successful people like you do not understand the struggles that creatives face. You are privileged and out of touch, and you are using your money to manipulate me into living the boring, conventional life that you have chosen for yourself." That evening, Sophie sent me a series of increasingly angry text messages. She accused me of being manipulative and claimed that I was using money to control her life choices. She said I was jealous of her freedom and authenticity, and that my desire for her to be financially responsible was really about forcing her to abandon her dreams. The final message was the one that changed everything. "You are such a controlling jerk. I am done with you and your money. Do not contact me again." Within hours, I was blocked on all social media platforms. My phone calls went straight to voicemail, and mutual friends reported that Sophie was taking space from me. The sister I had supported financially and emotionally for 3 years had cut me completely out of her life because I had dared to suggest that she contribute to her own expenses. For 2 weeks after Sophie's explosive exit from my life, I found myself questioning everything. Was I really being controlling? Had I been unreasonable to expect some contribution after 3 years of complete financial support? I went over every conversation, every text message, every interaction, trying to understand how asking for basic responsibility had made me the villain in this story. My friend Amanda, a fellow lawyer who had watched this situation unfold over the years, finally gave me the reality check I needed. "Delia," she said over coffee, "she called you controlling for asking her to be responsible for her own life. She cut you off because you suggested she contribute to her own rent after 3 years of free support. If she wants complete independence from your so-called control, then give her exactly what she is asking for." That conversation crystallized my decision. If Sophie truly believed that I was controlling and manipulative, and if she genuinely wanted to be free from my influence, then I would respect her wishes completely. She could have the total independence she claimed to want, which meant the total financial responsibility that comes with it. My first step was to call the apartment management company. "This is Delia Morrison," I told them. "I will not be renewing my lease guarantee for Sophie Morrison's unit, and I will not be making any future rent payments on her behalf." I then canceled the automatic payment that was scheduled for the 1st of the next month, stopped her car insurance payment, removed her from my family phone plan, and closed her access to the credit card I had given her for emergencies. As a lawyer, I made sure to document everything. Over the 3 years of support, I had paid over $126,000 in rent alone, not including the additional expenses for insurance, utilities, groceries, and various emergencies. I consulted with a colleague about potential legal implications and confirmed that I had no formal obligations to continue support. 3 days after I stopped the payments, reality began to hit Sophie hard. The apartment management called her about the upcoming rent payment, and Sophie confidently told them there must be some mistake. When she called them back and discovered that I had indeed canceled my payment guarantee, panic set in. Rent was due in 10 days, and she had no way to come up with $2,500. Sophie's desperate attempts to contact me revealed just how thoroughly she had burned our bridges. She tried calling from friends' phones, but I had stopped answering unknown numbers. She showed up at my law firm, but security would not let her upstairs without an appointment. She sent messages through mutual friends asking for an emergency meeting, but my response was consistent. She made her choice clear. The scrambling that followed was both predictable and pathetic. Sophie tried borrowing money from friends, but none of them had $2,500 to lend to someone with no prospect of paying them back. She attempted to get a loan from the bank, but her 3-year employment gap and lack of credit history made her completely ineligible. She desperately applied for jobs, but entry-level positions would not pay enough to cover her expensive lifestyle, and she lacked the qualifications for anything better. When Sophie finally had to call our parents and explain that she was facing eviction, the truth about our arrangement came out for the first time. Our parents were shocked to learn that I had been supporting her completely for 3 years, and that she had cut me off for suggesting basic financial responsibility. The conversation with my mother was particularly revealing. "You cannot let your sister become homeless," Mom said when she called me. "She made her choice," I replied calmly. "She told me she was done with me and my money. I am simply respecting her decision. But family helps family no matter what. Family also treats family with respect." Sophie made it clear that my help was unwelcome and controlling. I am giving her exactly what she asked for: complete independence. When my parents learned the full extent of my financial support, and Sophie's attitude toward it, their perspective began to shift. They had believed Sophie's version of events, which painted her as a struggling artist, and me as an occasionally helpful sister. The reality of $3,500 per month in support, combined with Sophie's entitled demands for more, shocked them into understanding my position. The 30-day eviction notice was posted on Sophie's door exactly 1 month after I stopped payments. She had to rapidly downsize her possessions, selling designer items at a fraction of their original price, just to raise money for moving expenses. The reality of her unsustainable lifestyle hit her like a freight train when she realized that 3 years of luxury living had been entirely dependent on someone else's generosity. Sophie was forced to move back in with our parents in their modest suburban home in Arizona, a 60-minute commute from any entertainment industry opportunities. The luxury amenities, convenient location, and networking possibilities she had claimed were essential for her career were gone overnight. She had to explain her situation to friends and industry contacts, admitting that her lifestyle had been artificially maintained by family support. After 6 weeks of complete silence, Sophie finally managed to get through to me. Her voice was tearful and desperate as she offered what she called an apology for our misunderstanding. She claimed that stress and artistic pressure had caused her to overreact, and she begged for one more chance, with promises that she would be different this time. My response was calm and final. Actions have consequences, Sophie. This was your choice, not mine. You made it very clear that you were done with me and my money. I am simply respecting your decision and giving you the independence you wanted. The long-term consequences continued to unfold over the following months. Sophie struggled to find employment that would support even a basic lifestyle, eventually taking an entry-level retail job that paid $15 per hour. The networking opportunities and industry connections she had claimed were so important became impossible to maintain from her parents' house. Friends gradually distanced themselves, as Sophie could no longer participate in the expensive social activities that had defined her Los Angeles lifestyle. The first month without the financial burden of supporting Sophie felt surreal. Having an extra $3,500 in my monthly budget was like receiving a substantial raise without any additional work. I maxed out my 401k contributions, built up my emergency fund, and started saving for vacation plans that I had been postponing for years. The psychological impact was even more significant than the financial relief. For the first time in 3 years, I could make decisions about my money based on my own goals and priorities, rather than Sophie's demands and emergencies. I started therapy to help process the family dynamics that had led me to enable Sophie's behavior for so long, and Dr. Sarah Chen helped me recognize the people-pleasing patterns that had made me vulnerable to manipulation. Through therapy, I learned to distinguish between helping someone and enabling them. True help empowers people to become independent and self-sufficient, while enabling creates dependence and prevents personal growth. I realized that my 3 years of financial support had actually hurt Sophie by removing the natural consequences of her choices and preventing her from developing essential life skills. 3 months after cutting off Sophie's support, I made significant improvements to my own life. I moved to a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment with a city view, bought a reliable newer car, and took my first real vacation in years, spending a week in Italy exploring art museums and enjoying fine dining. I also invested in career development courses that helped me secure a promotion to senior associate. Meanwhile, Sophie was experiencing her own forced character development. The reality of working 40 hours per week was building a work ethic she had never possessed. She was learning to appreciate small achievements and developing genuine friendships that were not based on her lifestyle or social status. For the first time in her adult life, Sophie was saving money and learning basic financial planning skills. 6 months after our confrontation, Sophie called me with a completely different tone. There were no requests for money or favors, just a simple acknowledgement. I understand now what you were trying to teach me. She shared news about a promotion at work and her plans to rent her first apartment that she could afford independently. The entitlement and hostility were gone, replaced by genuine humility and self-awareness. I appreciated Sophie's growth but maintained clear boundaries about our relationship moving forward. I agreed that we could slowly rebuild our connection, but it would be based on mutual respect and equality, rather than financial dependence. I made it clear that the era of financial support was permanently over, and that our future relationship would focus on being sisters rather than enabler and dependent. 1 year after the confrontation, Sophie was living independently in a modest but comfortable apartment, dating someone who shared her work ethic and values, and pursuing acting as a hobby while maintaining a stable career in office management. She expressed gratitude through actions rather than words, demonstrating the maturity and responsibility that had been missing during our years of financial arrangement. My own life had transformed dramatically as well. The promotion to senior associate came with a salary increase to $220,000, and I was dating someone who appreciated my generosity without trying to exploit it. My relationship with our parents had improved because it was now based on honesty rather than their incomplete understanding of the family dynamics. The most important transformation was my newfound confidence in setting boundaries with anyone who tried to take advantage of my giving nature. The experience with Sophie taught me that real love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices even when those consequences are painful. 18 months later, Sophie and I have regular but appropriately bounded contact. We attend family gatherings where both of us contribute financially to shared expenses, and Sophie often expresses gratitude for what she calls my refusal to enable her victim mentality. Our relationship is built on mutual respect and genuine sisterly affection, rather than financial obligation and resentment. The wisdom I gained from this experience extends far beyond family relationships. I learned that you cannot want someone's success more than they want it themselves, and that boundaries are not punishments but requirements for healthy relationships. True generosity builds people up by helping them become self-sufficient, while enabling behavior tears them down by creating dependence and preventing growth. Sophie later told me during one of our heart-to-heart conversations, "I thought you owed me support because you were successful. I never realized how much I was taking until it was gone. Being forced to stand on my own was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though I hated you for it at the time." The most profound lesson I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop helping someone who is not helping themselves. Real love requires tough choices and difficult boundaries, especially when dealing with people who have learned to take advantage of your kindness. The best gift I ever gave my sister was not my financial support for 3 years, but my refusal to continue it when she stopped appreciating it. They say money cannot buy happiness, but I learned that money can definitely prevent growth. The best gift I ever gave my sister was not my financial support for 3 years, but my refusal to continue it when she stopped appreciating it. Sometimes loving someone means teaching them to love themselves enough to become independent. Have you ever been taken for granted by someone you were trying to help? Do you think I was too harsh, or was tough love exactly what my sister needed? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if this story reminded you that enabling someone is not the same as loving them. Subscribe for more stories about family boundaries and the courage it takes to say no to people you care about. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their generosity should never be taken for granted. Remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you are willing to accept, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you the strength to set healthy boundaries with the people in your life who need to learn the value of independence.